designers. He built the Kunstkamera, of course, his 300th anniversary, so the building gets set up in the Summer Palace in 1713, and then the building itself, I believe, is open to the public in 1724. I'm not quite sure of that, but this is when he's being a shipbuilder and then, collecting things, and he has little people and he has giants. There's another little person. There's the actual Kunstkamera itself. And he also has little dogs, a few things. Dogs, right? You can see there's a globe in the Kunstkamera. There's an observation room. There's the meeting room for the Russian Academy of Sciences. And this is another Rosamund Purcell picture. This is the Frederick Rausch Memento Mori. So he was very much interested in the fleeting nature of things. So his collection contained that. On to a few pictures of that. That's Rausch again. This is the actual Kunstkamera as it appears today. A giant toad. There's on the left-hand side. I'm sure James can identify what's on the left-hand side. It is a fetal display, an anatomical display of a fetal anomaly, and James would probably call it a
pickled punk.
Pickled punk. There you go. So it's translated into Coney Island sideshow circus stuff. But there's, you see, an anatomical display that melds, this is Frederick Rausch again, art and science. So Peter the Great was extremely interested in art and science being one. And so you get, and there's this giant. He found a giant in France and brought him home, or bought him. We were told he bought the giant in France. So he bought a human being, brought him home, and he was very, very large. Peter the Great himself was 6'8" or something. There's a statue of Peter the Great. He's standing next to a pretty tall Russian. So the giant was bigger than he was. He was probably very impressed by anyone bigger than he was, because he didn't get to meet them very often. Bourgeois' heart, the heart of the giant, is on display in the Kunstkamera today. And there are Peter the Great's teeth. That's my photograph, that's Rosamund Purcell's photograph of the teeth he pulled next to, I think, another anatomical display. There's far too much in the Kunstkamera to go into in detail. I did want to show the two-headed calf, which is just a staple. There was one in Vermont, actually, a two-headed calf up in someone's barn, and they used it for target practice. Darn them, I would have been killed to get that two-headed calf. But the fetal displays are extremely interesting. They were studying anatomy. They were trying to prove these were not monsters. And they were very confused sometimes by animals they found. For instance, the opossum really freaked them out, because if you've never seen an opossum, that is just a freaky animal. So all of these museums contain at least one stuffed opossum or an opossum display. A baby in a pouch, a naked tail. Two-headed babies in a jar. And these are real. James has seen plenty that aren't real. But that's a good one, right? That's a great one. Whereas they're real. Shells also were used as decorative elements. Again, they were combining art and science into one thing. That's just a ring of fetuses, a wreath of fetuses, fetal anomalies. The main point of the Kunstkamera was it went on to be a collection of cultures from around the world, including an ethnographic museum of the New World, including their New World, which was the Northwest Territories of us, which was the far Northeast Territories for them. Alaska was theirs, then it became ours. So they have a huge collection of Northwest Native or First Nation people, including this, I think, Cherokee or Sioux. I think that's a Sioux collection. They have a massive collection of Native American stuff. It's one of the largest in the world, and it makes sense. But they have it because they were there first. They were there in the Northwest Indian Passage, at least before we were. This is a dime museum in New York City. So after these collections get started, by the time New York City is around and you go to a captive audience walking the streets of New York City every night, Barnum's Museum was the best museum in New York City. This is a museum, and this appeared in Harper's Weekly. Have you ever seen this, James? This is a museum to keep your children away from. You notice the two little waifs out in front. No, don't let them go in. Don't let them. There were actually museums, dime museums in New York City, that when you would enter the front door, you would see some scandalous thing. They would plant chloroform in a handkerchief over your mouth. They would roll you out the back door and take the contents of your wallet. So there were very seedy museums in New York City in the 19th century. But the Harper's Magazine article goes on to say, this is the type of museum we want. This is the projected, or construction, under construction, New York Museum of Natural History, the American Museum of Natural History. Looking back on it, though, I don't think many of us can see. You see a mummy, you see things from the South Seas, you see a spear from this or that island. And then in the New York Natural History Museum, you see the devilfish, and you see a giant whale, and you see a leaf from Shakespeare's grave. So all these things. Masks from Japan. All these things were basically the same museums. Some have a veneer on it, and some do not have the veneer on it. The Siamese twins, the original Siamese twins were in Barnum's Museum. That got taken over and taken by countless sideshow and show people. And these are, this is an actual advertisement for Shrunken Heads, taken directly from the pages of Shocked and Amazed. This is an actual advertisement for Shrunken Heads. What is it, the 60s?
Yeah, Homer Tate, yeah, that's probably early 60s, late 60s, yeah.
Yep. And it says, Shrunken Heads, what does it say? Manufactured to look just like the cannibals of the jungle.
Yeah.
Just like the cannibals of the jungle. Meanwhile, the New York Museum of Natural History, the American Museum of Natural History, they were kidnapping people from the Aleutian Islands. They were bringing in Sioux Indians and Cherokee Indians and displaying them as living tableau. And this is Matthew Grady's picture of, I believe, Sifting Bull, but I'm not quite sure. I know it's a Matthew Grady picture. In other words, high-class museums and the low-class museums were sometimes not very far apart, especially in the 19th century. Which brings us to the sideshow, the big show, the circus, the man we've all come to see tonight. What's that from? I just got that one in there. Who is that guy?
I'm not sure who or what did that banner.
It's
simultaneously ghastly and amazing. It's probably exactly what you need in front of a show. So.
That's right.
That would have got him in.
Yep, we'll bring it in. We want to put one on the front of this building eventually. We will be able to do it. We're getting bigger with our banners. And there's Peter the Great. And there's the memento mori, the fleeting nature of human life. But without further ado, I want to thank Mr. Taylor for coming here tonight. Thank you.
It's all because he can't clap his call. Thank you for that round of a standing ovation. The beast that walks like a man.
Can you see me down here?
Hi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Up here.
Hey,
Let's do that again. Thank you for coming.
oh, hey.
Live on stage.
Thank you. Grab the stage. Those old show guys always told me you wear a funny hat your first guy to get your picture taken. So sometimes not to as great a effect when they're like, so I just talk out the side of my mouth there. No, I can't. I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, is what many people have accused me of. God, this technology is frightening the hell out of me. In any event, geez, where to start? Let me see. I have to follow David Fairbanks Ford and Peter the Great. This is going to be a hell of an act. In any event, yeah, thank you all for showing up tonight. In what I think inarguably is one of those spots that has helped recreate the Dime Museum here in America. The Main Street preceded museums that David was referring to that, I've had practical experience in them. Yeah, and I'll elaborate on that to some greater extent as the evening goes on. But David's preceded ours, the American Dime Museum in Baltimore, and eventually my Palace of Wonders in Washington, D.C. And by quite a few years. When did you open here?
92.
Yeah, so he preceded the American Dime Museum by 7 years. So to that extent, he kind of kicked it all off. The fact that none of us really knew about each other at that time, I think is kind of a testament to the way these things work. None of us got a lot of attention. The internet was sort of, kind of not what it is today, which is like everywhere, bigger than NSA. And so at that point, we all thought we were doing this amazingly brand new thing, or a resurrection of a thing. That was the new aspect of it. And David spoke at some length on Peter the Great, and mentioned Barnum, and of course, Barnum today is finally getting his due. He's, for decades and decades after his death, he was essentially disparaged, despite the fact that, picture this. The American Museum in Manhattan was probably as big as any museum any of you guys have ever been in, certainly as big as any I've ever been in. It's probably about 2/3 the size of the Smithsonian in DC. And in that museum, which the Smithsonian rapidly tried to bid against to get attractions, but they didn't have Barnum's money. In that museum would have been not just all the strange and the bizarre, the unusual and the exotic that you'd have expected in the Peter the Great's collection, pickle punks, etc., but it would have been literally a natural history museum as best understood, or it could be understood in that era. So you're talking the mid-1800s, and there's all these amazing things from the globe. It's a big era. It's the Industrial Revolution. It's all this. It's Western European exploration. America's being reinvented, having broken away from Great Britain, and now it's the Industrial Revolution rolling through, and we got all those waves of immigrants coming in, and they're all working in the factories in shifts, and they have nothing to do when they're not working. And politically, and at the entertainment level, which, come to think about it, I sort of repeated myself, you needed to distract those people as much as possible. And you need to distract them because, just as one example, in New York, every summer in New York, there were at least 2 to 3 citywide riots that would go on. The police force was in its infancy as much as, you could call in anybody you want to try to slow those things down, but people had fairly little to do and were more than willing to do it to each other. And so all these distractions were simultaneously necessary, because show people had rolled into this mix following the manner of Peter the Great, but geared much more toward money making. That provided a place for all those immigrants and those people streaming in from the farms to work in the factories. It gave them a place to be. It gave them things to see. From the very early days of museums, though, Peter the Great's was essentially what a lot of those cabinets of wonder were, those Kunstkammer. They were, whether those guys in that era wanted to admit it or not, they were bragging rights. They were look at this amazing thing I can amass, look at this amazing thing I can frame, this amazing display I can show you, and in order to keep it legit in my conscience, I'm going to make it, illustrate the progression of the species all the way up to man at the top of the food chain, all that sort of biblical illustration. And so in the midst of all that soup, as I said a couple of moments ago, the show people roll in. And when they roll in, you start to see the beginnings of that dichotomy which exists today. Everybody acts like it's brand new. Were museums about education or are they about entertainment? The act that somehow those two things are supposed to be separated has just befuddled me since day one getting into the business. Essentially because the things you remember, the things you latch onto, the things you are educated by, better damn sight be entertaining, or you're probably going to forget them next week. How much you guys remember all that stuff that you sort of forced into your head in high school because you had to, but you hated doing it? You don't remember any of that mess. But you probably do remember the most entertaining instructor you ever had, who made you actually remember some of those things that you were being talked at by that teacher. It's the way for those of you who've run through college. It's the same thing. You remember those who entertained you as well as educated you. Because if they don't go hand in glove, as far as I'm concerned, you got neither one of them. You don't have entertainment anymore, you have amusement, which is like the cheaper end of the entertainment. You don't have education anymore because essentially you don't have any education, that's it. And the origins of that go pretty far back. You got to figure that the Peel family, everybody knows the Peels, Charles Wilson Peel, and the discovery of the mastodon and all the rest of this stuff. He built the first, not the first, but the oldest museum in the Americas when he built the Peel Museum in Baltimore. The museum still exists. Doesn't exist as a museum, sadly. But literally, when the old man and his sons Rembrandt and Rubens, remember those names, old man was a funny kind of guy with that. All the kids were named after painters and was a big deal musicians. But he tasked Rembrandt and Rubens with manning the museum in Baltimore while he manned the ones with representatives in New York, which went out of business in the face of Barnum's competition, and the one in Philadelphia. So this whole string of museums, up and down as much as it was then the East Coast. And then in D.C., politically, they're all debating what to do with all this crap. What to do with the stuff that's brought back by Lewis and Clark from their expedition. I mean, Jefferson had no idea what to do with that stuff. He's like, They didn't have museums like, well, the Smithsonian got some of it, but not very much. Barnum ended up with a lot of it because he bought it. And then what didn't end up getting bought by Barnum ended up getting squirreled away among some few other collections. We do have, we don't have Barnum to be thankful for, to the extent that so much of the Lewis and Clark expedition was in the American Museum in New York when it burned down the first time and took all these artifacts with it. But by the same token, what did survive, it was kind of a miracle because it's the early days of this stuff. Nobody knows what to do with these things. Private collections exist, but the idea of a public museum as we understand it today, it wasn't there. It took museums like the Smithsonian and Barnum's American Museum to get people to realize these were places where you could go and have fun, where you could be educated. Barnum was so successful at his museum that literally in the first 5 years he had that establishment open in Manhattan, he had as many people pass through as there were people in the United States at that time. That's a better track record than Disney World had in its first 5 years. So whenever anybody says, oh, Barnum's that guy that said there's a sucker born every minute, which he never said, I just want to smack him. Because here this guy is basically the Disney of his age. And literally you could go to the docks in New York City where the ships are coming in from Europe. They're bringing in all those immigrants. There's a bronze plaque on the docks, this big. It made that noise too when it went by. No, what's a ship without an interruption? Literally bronze plaques about this wide, but this tall. I've seen the damn thing. It's in a guy's house in Chicago. He bought everything that was still in existence of the Barnum family. He's a real nut. He spent himself in near bankruptcy with this stuff. But it's a bronze plaque. It's about this big. And all it says on it in raised letters is, see Barnum's first. That's what you saw when you came here from Europe. And that's just what they did. Now the thing to bear in mind here is, you're just off the boat from wherever the hell you're getting off from. Ireland, with the potato famine. You're coming from Paris because, you're sick of that, you're sick of Great Britain, you're sick of wherever you're coming from. And you land on the docks in New York City, and that's what it tells you to do. That's your education. That's how you come to see America. And believe me, we're still doing that. I mean, we are still that thing that educates by way of our entertainment, for better or for worse. But at the museum level in the 19th century, what you really had was the beginning of that split. You had the beginning of the split between education and entertainment. You had museums like the Smithsonian, and for that matter, the Peel, or all the sort of Peels, trying desperately to educate this populace that needed to be educated lest they become unruly, needed to be educated because, of course, that was the only way you could become part of a truly constructed body politic. So all these things are being bounced around as this is why museums are necessary. And then you have guys like Barnum and the Peel kids. Because Rembrandt and Rubens basically looked at the old man and said, Pop, we're not making any money in Baltimore off of your lectures on the mastodon skeleton. But we're making a lot of money off educated turkeys and fireworks demonstrations and lectures on animal taxidermy. So that's what they did. They basically turned the Peel Museum in Baltimore into a dime museum. Peel, meanwhile, the old man, is fighting desperately to have all of them be all high-minded and educational, and what he's basically doing is forgetting that core of what education needs to be. It needs to be something to hold people's interest. It needs to be something to get people's attention. That's the only way the education gets through. Barnum's line about all this is he believed himself to be one with the common man, he was the commonest of common men, and that's why he could make the money off of him that he did. Which is, come to think of it, pretty much what Disney understood as well. I'm not in any way saying that you're going to get the kind of education that most colleges, like say Dartmouth up the road, would want to give you if you go to Disneyland, but I don't know. I mean, you know, you see a lot of people who made a crap load of money coming out of that whole Disney establishment, including Steve Martin, Harry Anderson, a number of other people who worked at Disney World and Disneyland in their youth. So they got educated in some way about something, I'm sure. But in any event, so you have all this split and mix and back and forth throughout the 19th century. David mentioned the dime museums you didn't want to go into, but there were a bazillion kinds of museums in existence that qualified, in effect, as dime museums. There were medical museums. Some actually targeted medicine. You know, most of them were sort of what in the sideshow era they were called jock shows, essentially because they were kind of for men only. Women didn't go to them. The men went to them and were shown essentially the horrors of venereal disease, and then before they left they were pitched some product that was meant to cure their problem, which kind of didn't do much, but in that era you kind of couldn't do much more than take mercury anyway. But you know, you see, had all these wacky, strange, and crazy sort of museums going on, anything to make a buck off the public, all at the exhibition of the weird, the strange, the bizarre, the odd, the unusual, because you know, those early dime museum operators understood something about how to make a buck off of those things because they understood what people are. I mean, if you look at any culture, it doesn't matter the language, it doesn't matter how it's framed. I mean, people are essentially attracted to three things. Well, I gotta say sex because that's the first thing. It's sex, morbid curiosity, and the chance to have the living hell scared out of you. Any one of those three things translated across all cultures, all times, it doesn't matter. One of those three things, preferably all three at once, are going to get you money. They're going to get you entertained, or at least amused. And those are the things that are going to drag you into a show. They dragged you into the old dime museums, because believe me, they hit as hard as they could on those three things. They promised you the world to get you through that door, just like Sideshow did. The idea was, we're going to promise you everything we possibly can to get your money, and then after that we're going to give you any damn thing we feel like. Principally because by the time you've been sold to get in, you're probably not going to remember very much from what was out front. And that's the way all the sideshows work. And the sideshows themselves were an outgrowth of the dime museums. All those dime museum operators ended up fetching up at the 1893 Columbia Exposition in Chicago, which is cited as the birthplace of all the carnival business, all of the sideshow industry. And essentially it was all those future carnival people being smashed together at that World's Fair in what they called the Midway Plaisance, where they all looked at each other and realized simultaneously a couple of things. One, they were the only ones making any money at that damn fair. However much money got made on the door and all those pavilions, you know, crowing about, you know, the glories of Germany and the glories of Japan and the glory of America and the glory of the corn industry and the makers of twine and all these pavilions that these guys had built to speak to how amazing the fruition of the Industrial Revolution was. All the money's getting made down in the Midway, because that's where the amusement, that's where the entertainment is. And when people have been through all the pavilions, they've been through all the education hardcore, they need a break. So they go to the first Ferris wheel in the U.S., this enormous thing. They go to they go to, let me see, the streets of Cairo, where Little Egypt was born, as it were. I mean, where that whole act was created. They go to the big magic shows. They go to all those kinds of strange exhibitions, all those menagerie shows, all of that stuff. And what all those operators realize is, above and beyond the fact we're making all this money, we should be in competition with each other. We should be basically putting each other out of business, and we're not. We're all making the money, because a thing like that had never really existed. We didn't have all those assortments of show smashed together in one place. It had never been done. The circus had been touring the U.S. for close to 100 years at this point in time. And those future carnival people took their cue from that. They're like, oh, we can travel around, we can go all over the United States. We can pitch to the same people and make the same money that the circus guys do. And that's exactly what they did. Within the following decade, certainly by the beginning of the 20th century, you have the beginning days of carnival, which a lot of people don't realize here. The sideshows is a direct outgrowth of the dime museum. You go to a dime museum in the 19th century. You go in the early 1800s. And what do you see? You see a lot of static attractions. You see them once. How often you go back? How often you been back to the museums that you remember from your youth? Maybe you went back once. Maybe you take the family when they come to town to wherever one is close. But in all likelihood, you don't go back to the same museums over and over and over again, except this one, which I'd like to come back to a lot more than I do. But you just don't. And all those early museum operators realized, we have this attraction that gets you in one time a year, maybe, and we got to make money every stinking day. Because there's no work as hard as museum work, believe me. And what they realized very quickly was, if we don't change things up, we're not going to get people in. We're not going to get new bodies into this house. So they started dragging in the ethnographic displays, the peoples of the world. Oh, look, a little clump of Native Americans. Oh, a little clump of, guys from Russia. Look, clog dancers. Anything live they could drag. Sword swallowers, magicians. Anything they could drag in to get out the vote, to get the money. So that was the breeding ground for all of that carnival stuff, all those big sideshows with live acts as well as museum attractions. That's what all that stuff had its birth. And by the beginnings of the 20th century, it's roaring. Carnivals are touring the U.S. everywhere. There's probably close to 300 big sideshows by the time you get past World War I. I mean, that's a lot of show. Anybody been to a carnival in the last couple of years? If you saw a sideshow in that carnival, you were lucky. Because if you see 2 or 3 shows in any carnival anymore, that's probably a lot. There was a time when the carnival was split between 2 things. And it was rides and shows. That's what it was. And literally, it was 50-50. And there were scattered joints, as they call them. The grab joints where you get your food. The games where, you'd go for amusement because you sure as hell weren't winning the damn thing. It's all Sunday school now. Nowadays, don't worry about whether you're going to win or lose on a game. It's just like Vegas. You're probably going to lose, but what the heck? You're there for your own amusement. But the carnival's heyday between World War I and World War II also heralded the death of something else, and that was the dime museum. Because a lot of the reason those guys took to the road was because as static attractions in cities, there was too much competition. I mean, you've got the beginnings of organized sports in the 1800s, and by the beginning of the 20th century, it's roaring. Even things like the telephone are keeping people hooked to a device instead of going out to see things and pay money to see things. I mean, all this stuff that the 20th century heralded really spelled the end for the dime museums. There was actually only one dime museum, true dime museum in the U.S. in existence up until the 60s, and that was Hubert's in New York. And Hubert's in its last days was a pretty sorry sort of excuse for what those dime museums had been. I mean, it was essentially where what should have been retired performers went to work because it kept them warm. They didn't have to be out there on the road under canvas. And but even by the late 60s, 42nd Street, Broadway, it's all starting to go downhill. It's essentially the adult market, as it probably would have been on the Bowery in the 1800s, where there's really seedy dime museums, as a matter of fact. But even Hubert's folded by the 60s. So you've got this whole sort of era of that 60s and 70s where the sideshow and the midways dying. There's really nothing that can call itself dime museums in the U.S. anymore, except maybe roadside attractions, all those crazy, wacky things you'd see on the way to Florida and all the rest of it. That stuff was still kind of kicking around out there. But by and large, institutions like this that understood what those museums were and their origins, there weren't a lot of them left, like I said, outside the roadside attractions. So by the time you get to the era when you have like the 80s rolling in, and the late 80s and the early 90s, knuckleheads like me are looking around going, you know what this country needs? We need more dime museums. Jeez, what fools these mortals be. And so what I do have to preface this, of course I have to preface it with a pitch, because as an old show guy who's running one of the last of the carnival sideshows, the big old 10-in-1 sideshows, 10 acts in one show. They didn't promise you 10 performers, they promised you 10 acts. Half the time it would be like 2 people, and that would be it. But anyway, what got me started in it was Shocked and Amazed! The world's only publication to this day, because nobody else would be this nuts to do something like this. It's the only publication that's ever been, to my knowledge, devoted to sideshow and the things that make sideshow. Because when you go through, well, this is volume 9 as a matter of fact, there's articles in here on minstrelsy, on medicine shows. Here's a little one for you. Here's a funny little secret for you. You've all seen TV. You've all listened to the radio. It's a goddamn medicine show. I mean, for those of you who know anything about medicine show, they send the clown ahead. And I do mean clown. And he's going ahead, he's ringing a bell, or he's beating a drum, he's doing whatever he can to get people's attention, because already the word has spread to whatever burg they're rolling into, the medicine shows come to town. And of course, that's free show tonight. So the wagon rolls in, the professor gets out on the tail end of the drop gate of the wagon, and he proceeds to entertain the crowd. And he'll bring out a tattooed lady, or he'll bring out a sword swallower, and they'll perform right there on the drop gate of that wagon. And now the show's over, because now he's got to pitch the elixir to you that's going to lengthen your life. Let me see, show, followed by ad, followed by more show, followed by ad. There's nothing new in this stuff, people, believe me. Barnum and before, we invented all this crap. But there's a reason why it works. And this is what we need to see. This is how we are educated and amused and entertained as a species. But a lot of crazed individuals like me and David, and some few others scattered around, sort of fell in love with the business. I mean, I fell in love with the sideshow business, care of my mother's late boyfriend. After my father passed away, she took an old carnival guy, and I sort of, as much as I loved my old man, I got to admit, sometimes you meet your real father later on, and metaphorically, Jerry Farrow was really my dad for all this stuff. He'd been in the carnival business his whole life, had gotten into it essentially because he loved horses. So he had pony rides. And this was an era, because he grew up in the 40s and in very early 50s. And he was already on the road by the mid-50s. And he had the distinction of having the only pony ride that ever played Prell's Broadway shows, which was a carnival, except for the name Prell, which old man Prell did own that show. It had nothing to do with any of the rest of Broadway. Broadway shows? Come on, get great. There hasn't been anything on Broadway like this until recently, when they had Sideshow, which was all about the Siamese Twin Hilton sisters.
No, it was Broadway
which has the distinction of closing faster than any other show in Broadway's history. It was a great show, critically acclaimed, just not very sideshow. But anyway, I digress. I'm surprised I haven't digressed a lot more than I have, actually. That's my MO. David should have warned you. David, you needed to tell them before I got to this mic that I digressed.
I did.
I know. I was digressing back there, so I missed it. Never mind. I'm sorry. So anyway, so my mother's boyfriend was kind of the guy who got me into this. And what I didn't realize at the time was that, I'd never interviewed people cold. Here I am going out interviewing people that everybody's telling me, they're like, these carnies, they're going to freeze your ass out. You're not going to hear a thing out of these guys that's real. Because it's like every author in the world has approached these people. Everybody's hit them up and then burned them. It's like, well, that's not what I plan to do. The whole idea of the journal was to finally get into print what these people really thought of all of it. And what I found out, to my amazement, shocked and amazement, was that they'd been waiting their whole lives for somebody to talk to them like that. Because nobody got it. You know, what they wanted was, they wanted to hear how frightening all of it was, and ooh, and that little guy with the turtle boy, isn't he a strange guy? No, he's a little guy with like shriveled up arms and legs, and he's made money to look at him. But that's okay by him, because he didn't have to pay a dime to look at you, and you had to pay to come into this show. And now he's gonna do nothing like what was advertised on the front of that show, but what the hell, he got your money. Because that's, you know, all those born freaks, they were all the royalty in those shows. I mean, nowadays, you know, it's starting to change again, where the whole PC aspect of this, for a lot of decades, it was like, how can you do that with a poor people like guy doesn't have any arms, he's out there, he's going to embarrass himself on that stage, making a living. He's making a living. You might think it would be embarrassing to be up there, but it's no more embarrassing for him to work with his feet on that stage than it is for him to have to live with just his legs at home, or to go to the laundry or the grocery store. I mean, you know, who's paying to look at him then? Who's paying to see him do anything then? So all those born freaks, they made the money on the show because they sold the show. They were the ones who got people to come into those shows. And you can talk all you want about, oh, I wanted to see the sword swallower. Oh, crap, you wanted to see the guy with the little arms and the legs, believe me. There's a current performer, a gentleman by the name of Matt Frazier. And Matt got money to make a documentary, which was called Seal Boy Freak. And Matt was born, he's one of the original thalidomide babies. I mean, literally, these shriveled up little arms that kind of just barely come out of his shoulders. And otherwise, he's just, looks just like anybody else walking around the street. And gorgeous guy, ruggedly handsome guy with his little arms. And so he's grown up, he spent his whole life with this physical condition. And he first got into performing, and for those of you who do perform, you know what this is about. I mean, you gotta want to do it, because otherwise, the two things that people fear most in life are death and public speaking. And actually, death is second. So, you know, so you gotta want to do this stuff. So anytime somebody talks about, oh, these poor exploited people, oh, the things they were made, oh, crap, you know, it's like they're making the money, you know, at least they're making money. You know, most of them will tell you, at least I'm not living on the damn government. You know, so, oh, okay, back up, Seal Boy, okay. But Matt Frazier's first exposure to performance was care of his band, because he's a drummer. And you can't make this crap up. God knows, I wish I could. And his first CD was Short-Armed and Dangerous. And he decides that what he's going to do is he has to find the origin of his. He has to find the roots to his act. He needs to find the origin of all of it. So what he does is he does what any Seal Boy would do. He comes to New York, where he goes to Coney Island, because he has to perform where, in effect, his inspiration for this act worked, and that was Stanley Barron, CeeLo the Seal Boy. And Stanley used to work up in Coney Island, made all of his money during the cold weather months, kind of in and around Coney Island and Hubert, up in Manhattan. And then during the warm weather, he'd be out with the whole circuit, the carnivals, making all the money. And so Matt Frazier comes here to the U.S. He's going to do this documentary, Seal Boy Freak. And literally takes the stage at Coney Island for a Coney Island crowd, which if you think New Yorkers as a rule are a pretty hard case, not like Coney Island. The Coney Island chant is, do something! Or swallow something! That's what I was like. I'm not even doing a sword swallow yet. And Matt's not performing some special show. He's just being touted as, and here's a new act! And his ass comes out on stage, and everybody in that audience is frozen solid, because he's on stage. And comes out, first time he's ever performed, because literally he recreated Stanley Barron's CeeLo the Seal Boy's act. So he's out there like sawing a piece of wood with a saw with his little arms and like shaving and doing all this kind of stuff to show you that, oh, hey, I do everything just like anybody else. And he comes out on stage, and his line to me was, He said, all I did was walk out on stage, and all I did was this. He said, his line to me was, he said, you have no idea the power that gives you. And it's the truth. Because it's like everybody in that audience instantaneously was like, that's what they're doing. Every single one of them, they're all doing that. I used to do the act some for the museum when I had the American Eye Museum in Baltimore. But I give presentations to students, high school students, college students and stuff. And usually it's about writing because that's how I got into the entertainment business. I didn't realize it was the entertainment business when I started doing it, but I realized it pretty quickly every time you got to step in front of a mic. And my line to them is, because I do a nail board, I stretch out on the nail board, and break concrete blocks on me, and then I do on top of me a panel with a sledgehammer and all this other crazy crap. And, oh, is it impenetrable, man, impervious to pain? Yeah, right. I got so beat up doing that act. Jeez. I started doing it because it was a kazoonie act. In carnival parlance, a kazoonie is any idiot you can get to do any idiotic thing. And I figured, I'm not a kazoonie, I can be that guy. And so I built this nail board, which was all wrong. Then I had to rebuild it, which was only marginally more right, but it was as right as carnival people expected to be. And I finally got used to laying down, we're getting it right. And now when I do that as the second half of the presentation. I talk to the kids about writing in the real world and what it means to do it for a living as opposed to satisfying your soul, which are not necessarily the same thing. And then I do the act. And I make sure I tell them, it's like, look, this is the deal. Everybody in this end of the business, they have a number of questions. One of those questions is, why do you do this? And my line to them is, you see that expression on your faces? There's not a writer on planet Earth who would kill to have that expression on an audience's face when they finish reading a poem to them. Good luck. Not going to happen. I don't care who you are. Read the people. Nah, it's not working. It's not happening. You give them a play, you give them a sideshow act, you're going to start seeing that stuff. And that's what people who want to perform want to see. Museum directors want to see that as well, don't they, David? They want to have people obviously enjoy themselves when they come to those places. I didn't realize when I started Shocked and Amazed, but that was the beginning of my realizing that I waited my whole life to create a museum, which turned out to be the American Eye Museum in Baltimore, which at that time we touted as the only museum devoted to the history of museums. Which after a fashion it was. But of course we only took that history up to the point where we got sick of it. And so it sort of stopped about 1915. Kind of right there at the Dime Museum's going downhill. So it was all this wild and crazy and lunatic and chock-a-block with legitimate natural history sort of stuff. And it was an amazing sort of exercise because it taught me a number of lessons, not the least of which was as seen on TV only matters if you can make a buck off of it. That place was a license to print money, maybe. It was actually a license to get media. But for those of you who, like I said, are in the business, you realize pretty quickly, you know, the big deal newspaper article that appears this week for the carnival show that's this week ain't going to do you a damn bit of good next week when you're 4 states away. The newspaper article that appears this week, and you're on a Dime Museum in Baltimore, is probably not going to do you any good in Baltimore. Born and raised. Baltimore is the town. Well, we're all cheap sons of bitches. None of us want to spend any money. That's what it boils down to. Let's just get this over with right here. So when we opened the doors, we thought we're going to get these people coming in. And the first weekend we're open, we got a lot of people. First weekend we were open from Wilmington, Delaware. Like an hour and a half, 2 hours away. They're all going down to the Inner Harbor in Baltimore, and they're going to stop at the American Eye Museum that they read about. And oh look, this is a place to stop, Martha. We can take the kids. Look, it's cheap to get into. It's going to be cheaper than going to the Inner Harbor. So they came. And meanwhile, all my compatriots in Baltimore, hey, saw you on TV. Good luck. Oh yeah, I got more well-wishing from my locals than you can imagine. See, what we didn't realize was that it was no longer the 19th century. I don't know how that slipped past us. Just my ex-partner and I sort of, yeah, well, we communicated honestly, I'll put it that way. Yeah, no, we both sort of, as I'm sure, David can attest, I mean, these things don't sort of happen usually by any massive planning. And when they do, they sort of resemble the Smithsonian or real museums. When there are museums I want to go to, usually they begin as these ridiculous sort of ad hoc exercises, almost like Mickey Rooney in one of his films where he's like, 15, he's going, I got a great idea, I got a bar, let's put on a show! And you sort of start that way, and the next thing you realize is, oh, gee, I got this thing, and I got to do something with this thing, and I got to figure out a way to get the same people back over and over, and it's like, and here we are reinventing the 1800s again, because now we got to go to live shows, we have to keep up with the ante on all the attractions, things have to keep getting bigger and sexier and weirder and crazier, because otherwise you're not going to get the same people back in again, and you got to make money on the door. We're not talking movie theaters, which can change their show, I don't know, 15 movie complex, changes its movies 2 to 3 times a week, they can make the money. But when you have museums, it's a different sort of MO you have to operate by. So you have to always keep thinking, how do I get media? How do I get the attention? And you very quickly realize this is the showbiz. This is the origin of some of the showbiz we have now. When you think about it, the dime museums were where some of the first performances that we now consider legitimate theater occurred. Barnum had legitimate theater in the American Museum because it got people in the door. He also realized that such institutions, because he didn't invent dime museums, but he certainly perfected them at the American Museum in Manhattan. He realized that, if all we're doing is pitching to sports and guys who want to pick up whores, if that's all we're pitching to, we're very quickly going to get put out of business by the law and shut down, or the market's going to dry up for everything except these people. Barnum made it palatable. Barnum put on the first production of Uncle Tom's Cabin in Manhattan. He had Shakespearean plays performed on the stages in the American Museum. They were usually performed by the freaks that he had working for him, but that's another story. I would love seeing that as but meanwhile, Macbeth was like Tom Fun. But somebody needed to do that play. I'm just sorry I missed it. So here we are at the American Dime Museum, and we're doing anything we can to get it. We had a Lord's Last Supper show in wax, made no money. God, it was just horrible. You always had to watch that room though, because people did some pretty strange things with those figures when we weren't there. Charged separate admission to that show. We kind of kept the riffraff out. But we had to close that after a year. So I guess that second coming thing just didn't work out. So. But we very quickly moved from the front rooms and the basement of one house that we occupied. It was all these row homes, all these grand and glorious late 19th century kind of row homes in Baltimore, beautiful structures when they were first built. We covered up all the distracting elements with huge banners on the front. The American Dime Museum, Kentucky Redwood Bat, see the giant bat! And blood and guts and all the rest on the front, and you got it, and it was like a 9-foot wood, sort of like a big bat. Come on! The only reason we got that attraction was because the sideshow guy we bought that from, anytime somebody wants to tell you that sideshow people are all lying to you, well, they are, but they mean it well. It's all in good fun. But sometimes they delude themselves, like the guy we got the giant Kentucky Redwood bat from. He was so dedicated to getting it right that he actually had the bat reproduced, like in wood. So here you got this 9-foot thing that's made out of like oak. So it takes like 6 guys to lift the damn thing. Needless to say, when my partner and I, the American Dime Museum, bought it, show guy who sold it to us, Bobby Reynolds, was like, that's great, now my boys can stop giving me crap about that damn bat. Because they were sick of schlepping it in and out of the trailer once a week. It's like, I gotta get that damn bat out for the show. So yeah, fiberglass we built, but it was a real fake of a fake. You know, unless you're 6 degrees removed, it's no fun. It's no show. It's just no show. But so yes, we had the giant Kentucky Redwood bat. We had wax figures. That not, you know, the Lord's Last Supper kind of came away. It would have worked if it was animated. See, that's what I told you we should have done. We should have done the animatronic one. You know, where Judas is like, you know, doing all this kind of stuff. But we couldn't afford that one. So what we did, we had a wax figure of Joseph Merrick, the Elephant Man. We had a figure of Daniel Lambert, the fattest man in the world in this era. In fact, he was the London Fat Man. He's the guy that we have Uncle Sam. Well, it's John Bull for the Brits, and Joseph Lambert was the inspiration for Daniel Lambert was the inspiration for John Bull, like the big fat guy, you know, with the flag vest and the whole 9 yards. I mean, that's the way Lambert used to perform. He would rent rooms in the early 19th century. He'd rent rooms in and around London, and he'd have his people post bills all over town. You know, see the London Fat Man, see the biggest man in the world, the giant man. People would pay money and they'd talk to him, and he'd lecture about what it meant to weigh 5 million pounds and all the rest. And that's how a lot of these old show guys made their money. We couldn't make that kind of money at the American Dime Museum because we just didn't get enough bodies in the door. We were as legitimate as we could be. We were open 6 days a week. We had to be closed one day. We were open 6 days a week, or else we wouldn't get that museum attention. Weekdays were perilously slow. Weekends were only a little less so, depending on the weekend. We found out one amazing thing for those of you who want to play any of this kind of game. It's amazing the audience you get off of radio. TV, newspapers, kind of, maybe the first weekend after. But radio, something about radio people, they gotta go see two-headed calves and unicorns. It's NPR people is what it is. That's exactly what it is, NPR. I think there was a reason I kept listening to NPR. I kept listening for all that weird crap. So I stayed with it after he and I created it in a matter of months. I mean, we did. Having been inspired to do Shocked and Amazed, I ended up stumbling on my ex-partner, Big Horn. I ended up stumbling across him, careless with people who were tangentially connected to the business. And he was making all these weird gaffes, sea serpents, and the hairball from the belly of the Jacques Poor Ghost, a man-killing tiger that was slain by the British officer. Yeah, it's all crap. He's making it in the background. And he made some beautiful things. And they were some of the major attractions we had. He did, I thought the most popular attraction was Lincoln's Last Turd, which was touted as a fake, because it was actually a fake of a fake of a fake. I might get out of here. God, it never stops. He had crafted Lincoln's Last Turd as an admitted fake, which had been made by a gentleman soon after Lincoln's assassination, or actually was closer to the early 20th century, because the fake was revealed when there was an autopsy done of the movement, and it was discovered that there were the remains of Necco wafers in it. And unfortunately, Necco wafers did not exist, nor were they certainly weren't a favorite of them because they weren't invented yet. So that was how the fecal forger was forced to flee. Gosh, that's my one. But my ex-partner is a genius for stuff like that. And so we had all those gaff attractions, and we had a lot of legitimate stuff. We had we had real Fiji cannibal weapons and all the rest of this kind of stuff scattered throughout. All those things that dime museums had, all those sort of weird and unusual things. Well, weird and unusual to us because we're not using those things. Well, the first things you want to ask yourself in a museum is, who defined that this is weird to me? other than yourself, because you gotta do that for yourself. But mostly it's things made to be exotic, right? I mean, when you see an elephant for the first time, and you're saying in the United States and it's like 1810, that's a pretty amazing animal. I mean, you've probably never seen anything other than these horrible sort of etchings of what an elephant might look like, done up by a guy who kind of had one described to him when he was drunk. I mean, that's kind of what you're going to see, and that's what you're going to know. So the first time you see an elephant, or the first time you see the camel leopard, as they called the giraffe when they first came to the U.S. Because they did, it looks like a leopard with all those spots, and they got that long neck like kind of camels don't really have. They have those lips. They have those camel lips. That's what it is. But anyway, so it's all this stuff made to seem exotic, and that's what we kind of try to do with the American Dive Museum. That's what any museum does. They want to educate you by showing you things that you don't normally see, and they want to show you things that even if you do see them, they're going to tell you something you didn't know about them, because that's how they get to you. That's how they impress you with what they want to educate you on. And you know, my ex-partner Dick Horn and I, we did a kind of an amazing thing at the American Dive Museum. You got to figure in the week that the scandal hit with Michael Jackson, those years before he died, you know, the kids, the whole 9 yards. Front page of the Sun papers was Michael Jackson and us. We had a really good weekend that weekend. Next couple weekends, not so good. You know, we tried to get in touch with Michael Jackson to see if he wanted to kind of help us out, but it was not happening. He just didn't return the phone call, so we blew that. But after a few years of Dick Horn and I kind of beating each other up over what we did and didn't do and how we did and didn't make money, we parted ways. Care of artistic differences, I guess, is the best way to put it. That's always the way performers part ways. We had artistic differences, which meant they really wanted to kill each other in their sleep. So I kind of took the bow out in 2003, having created the thing with him in 99. And miraculously, I know it didn't work this way for David, but for us, we literally sort of stood around in the spring of '99 and found that we couldn't stop talking about museums and museum creation. We were like, can we do this? You think we can do this? We opened up November 1st. I mean, 6 months is pretty brutal. There's no getting out of it. But we did it. And it's a lot of volunteer labor and a lot of just blood, sweat, and tears, and 24-hour days to build a place and sleep on the basement floor while we're in the midst of construction because we didn't want to stop being should become knuckleheads we weren't. But by 2003, I'm done. I was like, this is it. You know, it's ruining my life. I'm living in this place. I'm staring at my partner when we don't have any other audience for hours on end, just kind of waiting for the customers to show up, doing anything we can to get ink and on radio and TV. And it's just relentless, the slog we got to go through. But we realized pretty early on that this was what it was going to have to be because we didn't have what's necessary, which is something we can change regularly, getting a performance space. So after I pulled out, within a matter of months, my late partner in Shop and Maze, Kathleen Codger, who was living in the district, I'm from Baltimore, she was from D.C., she was jumbled up with all these crazy sort of bar and restaurant people who built those things out. And one of those guys, his MO, was to buy in completely run down, horrifyingly ghettoized sort of places where everybody was fleeing, buildings burned down, and everything else, buy up as much as he could cheap, using everybody else's money, which is, I found out the way great business always works. And then he'd reinvent whole neighborhoods around themed bars and themed restaurants and all this kind of wacky stuff. And then if those neighborhoods made it, great. He pulled far enough away that he didn't have to lose the dough. He kept the rake off of whatever profits he could. He moved on to another neighborhood. And that neighborhood was remade, reborn. He did it with U Street. He did it to a limited extent with some of the outskirts of DuPont Circle. I mean, he did it all around the district. Well, now he's focusing on H Street Northeast, which was one of the last of the neighborhoods you could buy in. It's also the closest neighborhood to Baltimore. I mean, I could jump in my car, I could be sitting in front of what became the Palace of Wonders. If I didn't hit traffic in 50 minutes, it's great. We could actually start getting these cheap suckers from Baltimore to leave town maybe. Because what my late partner approached Joe England with, who's the money guy, she's like, so, heard you reinventing H Street? It's like, yeah, themed restaurants and bars. She says, I got an idea for you. My partner in Shop in a Maze just pulled out of the American Dime Museum. Why don't you do a club based in Sideshow? And he was like, that's a great idea. And from early in '04, late in '03, until June of 2006, we built out an abandoned building. I barely had a first and second floor that you could walk on without killing yourself. The stairs had to be constructed to the second floor because they were long gone. And we talked out how to build it out. Cut a mezzanine out on the second floor, gilded rail that you can look down on the stage, which was actually a little smaller than this. But it doesn't matter, come on, you get two people on it. How much room do you need to swallow a sword? And we built the Palace of Wonders. And I guess what you need to imagine is, imagine the contents of, probably the contents of here, a little less, sort of smashed down into about to here, and about to where the people stop. Kind of right about there. That was the size of the Palace of Wonders. And every place you looked, there's stuff in cases. It was just cased floor to ceiling. And just all with pumpkin colored light and all. Oh, it was a beautiful thing to behold. They had a back deck on it, and when you looked in through there was a window, they used to call it the Romeo window, because as you look into the back window of the place on the deck, you were looking down 2 floors onto the stage where the people would perform. So you could literally get a view of sword swallowing that very few people see. Because when they raised up, there was all those people around the mezzanine. So the traditional gesture from the sword swallowers, the women anyway, when the guys on the mezzanine were like, oh baby, swallow that. The traditional line was, calm me. You're it. You're gonna get lucky. You're right now. I'm gonna run this blade right through your damn gizzard. Anyway, it was just amazing. Oh, we had aerial acts in the place where literally they're performing. They're doing trap work level with the mezzanine. It was a grand and glorious place to work. And a lot of talent that now has, Miss Coniata 2 years ago, Cherry Lorraine, she first got on the stage at Palace of Wonders, had never been on stage, had actually never thought of performing before. And then she takes that stage and it's like, oh, this is okay. She was called by the audience for a magic act. As like, hell, I'm going to volunteer for the audience, and basically dragged her up on stage, and she's performing. She's still doing burlesque. She's done traditional theater. She worked in, I'm sure all the guys are familiar with Penn Teller. Teller co-wrote with probably the king of the sideshow nowadays, guy named Todd Robbins. Teller and Todd Robbins produced a show called Play Dead that Cherry Lorraine was in that seance show. She was sort of the hidden player. Because always seance shows are the same thing. I mean, they kill the lights, I can't see anything. Yeah, including all the people doing it. I mean, it's like all that miraculous stuff. I mean, it's all being done by cohorts and assistants and everything else, which doesn't make it any less amazing, frankly. It is the fact that all that stuff can be pulled off by those people is just blindingly amazing to me. But she's done that work. She saw her first performances on that stage. There's a sideshow troupe out there right now, which is considered one of the top 10 groups. Bunch calls themselves the Cheeky Monkey Sideshow, and some great people working in that show. They were sort of a ragtag bunch of people trying to figure out what to do, and the Palace was their home. That's where they first performed as Cheeky Monkeys, opposed to all the other sort of names they called themselves periodically. And a lot of other people, that was the first place they ever got any sort of real exposure. So it became a kind of a grand and glorious place where we kind of created the variety scene in DC. I mean, the burlesque and sideshow are sort of nearly everywhere anymore. what's the show? Is it American Horror Story? Is that what it is? I haven't watched a lot of TV. Their theme for the season is Sideshow.
Cool.
I mean, what's with that? Where did that come from? Sideshow, the production, the musical I just mentioned a little while ago, that was on Broadway, closed real quick. Despite the critical acclaim, distributed to beat The Lion King. And what they ended up deciding to do was, well, we'll just sell the rights to perform for this thing. That show's had more legs than any other show that you could ever name. It just played Kennedy Center down in D.C. So it's kind of getting to be everywhere anymore, burlesque and sideshow. But when you think back 10 years, it kind of wasn't that way. I mean, Cher can make all the movies she wants called burlesque, and it's just not going to happen. It doesn't do it. Principally because that movie had nothing to do with burlesque. But it's all starting to be everywhere anymore. I mean, burlesque is kind of seen as empowerment for the women doing it. I mean, in days of old, it was a business run by men that the women got the star money if they could, but otherwise they were just talent being trooped across the stage by a business run by showmen who knew how to make money off of burlesque. Pumped out a lot of great comics in its day. Milton Berle was out of burlesque, and Silvers was out of burlesque. Abbott and Costello. Abbott's considered probably the best straight man in the business in burlesque in his day before he teamed up with Costello. And Sideshow, despite its huge success between the World Wars, was in the process of dying on the carnival midways, and there weren't dime museums. So all these institutions like the Main Street here and less the American Dime Museum and the Palace of Wonders, and all of them kind of help give a bit of a rebirth to the business as it is. You got to have a place to work. You got to have a place to perform. And doing it in front of your mom ain't going to get you polished. It's just not going to do it. The plus the vaudeville was it gave you a lot of places to be bad. I mean, that's what it did. It got you a lot of chances to get out there and stink. Because if you don't stink a lot, you never get any good. You never learn what works and what doesn't. And until you stood in front of an audience and had to deal with somebody who didn't like your show, or an audience where they didn't like the lines you were feeding them, you don't know what it's like to do the business. And you don't know what it's like to do it well. And that's what all the old show guys, that's one of the lessons one of the first lessons I learned from all the sideshow guys. Back when I first started this, a couple of decades back, when there wasn't the business that it's beginning to be now, their line was that was the problem. There's no place for any of the up-and-coming talent to be bad. They've got no place to stink. And you gotta get on stage and be horrible. You gotta get booed off periodically. It's gotta happen. Anybody here in stand-up comics and do any of that work?
Oh yeah.
You gotta be bad. You gotta get up and be bad, because if you're not, you never get good. Unfortunately, at that old Palace of Wonders, despite what we were doing for the talent, I didn't own that though. I was just the guy that rented them all that amazing crap. When it was created, I had an amazing talent. Somebody who works the business now, a lady by the name of Jill Fleet. Thrill Kill Jill. World's only pregnant sword swallower. It's a great act, but you're going to do it for like 9 months and then it's done. Unless you get pregnant 3 times like she has, in which case you can milk the hell out of that. But yeah, she got a lot of ink out of that act. Unfortunately, she got suspended 3 kids, which they're going to be so much better when we graduate high school than that. They're great kids. They're great kids, but the kids are good. Eventually, they'll be the core of their own little circus troupe, I'm sure. But Jill helped me turn that place into the Palace of Wonders. She and an art guy and design guy in New York. And I told the money guy, Joe Amber, I told him, I said, Joe, this ain't a club. I know you do restaurants. I know you do clubs. It's none of that. It's a goddamn theater that serves a crap load of booze. And if you forget that it's not, if you forget it's a theater, it's a problem. Those guys never understood this theater. They owned the place. And it went from the Palace of Wonders with literally floor to ceiling, amber light, just gorgeous, to, well, you know, it's not kind of making the money it ought to make. Yeah, I know, it's a theater. You know, it's like, when's the last time anybody looked at that? You know, theaters don't make a lot of money usually. They make okay money, they pay the town, but they don't make bar money, they don't make like big club money. And they decided that the way they would fix that was by knocking the wall out between the palace and the joint next door, which was the Red and Black, which is a great bar. I love that bar. But they figured the way to do it was to reinvent it as the Red Palace, knock the wall out on the second floor, make the first floor bar on one side, bar on the other side. And what attractions there were now in cases like this. I brought that from the old palace, as a matter of fact. That was one of the cases. That's actually the kind of the Kunstkammer, the Cabinet of Wonders case, because we had each of the cases themed, so that as people went through it, they could be educated. And in those bottom two framed sets of attractions, you can see what in those old dinings or those old Kunstkammers, old cabinets of wonder, you'll see the types of things that they misunderstood and depicted as other things. A lot of them, of course, trace their origins back to biblical times, where we're seeing this as strange monstrosities that you couldn't see around anymore. Well, dinosaurs maybe. And the top of it is other sort of attractions that have had, had a home in those old dime museums and old cabinets of wonder. But that's what basically the Red Palace became. It became a lot of cased attractions, probably no more than 15-20% of what the palace had been. But the performance space was now huge compared to the stage like this. Now it was, 20 by 16 foot, and the ceiling was sort of about here. And if you kind of know anything about fire breathing, you know that's a problem. Actually, if you know anything about sword swallowing, you know that's a problem, because if you want to swallow a 24-inch blade, and you whip it up over your head, and you're 6 feet tall, and the ceiling is like about 8'4". Yeah, you're mostly swallowing swords on bended knee. It's kind of like proposing marriage, a very strange marriage. So the Red Palace rolled along for a couple of years, and then the word came, gee, it's not that we're losing money, but we're not making what we think we need to make. That's it. Red Palace closed its doors following the New Year's Eve celebration in 12 going into 13. Since then, all my stuff's been in storage. It's painful in many ways. Nothing's worse for a museum guy, hiding. It's horrible. It's one of the things that to me defines museum people as opposed to collectors and buffs. I've got nothing against collectors and buffs. Well, I do actually. No. Museums start with collections. That's what the cabinets were. They were cabinets of wonder. They were collections. But to me, it doesn't segue into the showbiz. It doesn't segue into public exhibition. You're just some crank hiding under a damn bed. And that's okay. I like cranks. I'm a crank myself. Big crank. I'm a first-rate crank in the rank of cranks. But to me, getting it out there for people to see and enjoy and maybe be educated by, that's what really all of it's about. That's what, kind of amassing all this strange and weird and bizarre stuff about. Because otherwise, you're just somebody holding the keys to the kingdom. I know a lot of people who have some damn warped stuff. Some got bought from them. Unless it's on public exhibition, I'm kind of like, well, gee, it's a great collection. It's great stuff in your house. But, let's get it all out there so people can kind of look at it and maybe part with their money to look at it. And that's the essence of the show. But there will be other museums. Main Street still exists. I get hit up with proposals for museums a couple times a month, and anything is possible. The plus for me in all of this is that I'm watching, as I mentioned earlier, about sideshow and burlesque starting to be everywhere. And it ain't people my age. I mean, we're the old farts, we're the old poops and this stuff. I mean, what's in the business now is people in their 20s, early 30s. By the time you hit your 40s, you've been around a decade and a half already, 2 decades already. And it's really kind of delightful and frightening to watch because all those young performers, some of them have learned this stuff the right way, some of them have, I don't know how they're still alive. But they all want to do it. They all want to rediscover this business. And what I tell them is that, in another 50, 60 years, this is going to be seen as the golden age of the rebirth of all of this. The rebirth of the era of the dime museums and sideshows and burlesque. It's going to be all of that. Because a lot of them are realizing, gee, I can't get out there on stage and just stink. I'm supposed to be entertaining. I'm supposed to make people enjoy the fact that they've seen me. And I think that's on its way. It's going to be a rough next 5 to 10 years from all, I'm sure. There's going to be a lot of alliances and enemies made thereby, I'm sure. That's the showbiz. So, but in any event, I've run my mouth for an awfully long time here about an awful lot of things. Any questions from any of you guys? Any questions about the museum business? Anything you want me to lie about at this point?
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Thank you.
It's applause. It's, the beast that walks as a man. Tries it.
Love you, Jim.
Yeah, well, there it is. Hey, I didn't need to see that, David. I didn't need to see that. I didn't need to see that.
You've seen so much.
Yeah, well, that's yet another story. Yeah, any questions? Anything else? Yes.
Leaving here and not having answered this would be criminal, but sideshow, our county guy.
Hey now.
Sideshow. Why sideshow? What was it on the side of? Is this?
Oh,
yeah,
that's a great question. I didn't get into a lot of terminology. Our sideshow is actually a circus term, because that's where sideshow started. Because carnival's after sideshow, carnival's after circus. First circuses in the world were being invented care of Astley in England around the time of the American Revolution, right, in the 1770s. And the first circus in the U.S. was in 1803 on John Bill Ricketts out of Philadelphia. Took the English idea, and he had worked with Astley and came here. And the victory for Astley was the realization that people would pay to watch a guy do horseback and do trick riding. And then he realized, gee, people really like these pantomimes, these clowns. I ought to get one of them to work with me. I can drag in some strange animals because I can get a hold of them now because I've made money off of doing this horseback act. So circus ends up getting invented. Circus gets bigger and bigger and bigger and graduates from enclosed structures, the circus buildings, because originally they were performed in amphitheaters and halls, and immense structures built specifically to watch equestrian acts and other types of performances, balancing acts and jugglers and all the rest of the stuff that now we accept as circus. And when it got big, they decided, gee, what we need to travel because we can't be building an amphitheater every 75, 100 miles. So it occurred to them we can put all this under canvas. So then they have the big top with the sidewalls around it. There's the front door, which for the carnival is where the marquee is, the big archway for You go through the front door and you walk the midway, which is between the front door and the big top. And all along the midway are the side shows. And that's what Carnival took as its idea. What Carnival decided was all those carnival operators, all those little dime museum guys, they decided, we could smash all of our shows together, which were essentially all side shows. And that's how Carnival ended up becoming essentially side shows. The rides were as much as an afterthought in a way. The the fact that they were half of it was because they wanted to have something for the kids to do. I mean, adults didn't really ride rides to that great extent. I mean, even now, you know, we do. I mean, it's a college age, and, you know, like roller coaster nuts, you know, get on. But the last thing in the world I don't do is get on a damn roller coaster. You know, I've chipped your bones on them damn things. I ain't getting on them anymore. That's I rode a cyclone in Coney Island. I was glad to walk away from it. You know, I mean, everybody else is like, yeah, this is so much fun. And I'm like, no, it's a goddamn thing. I'm not 25 anymore. Yeah, it's actually an old circus.
And another question?
Yes.
You segued right into it by going to services. I've met a lot of, we all know people that just deeply and for no reason just hate, with a deep prejudice, hate another group so completely, it's just that there's no end to it.
No!
How much you
You're kidding me, people hate each other?
despise them.
Thereby is the human species defined.
In the mid-70s, really briefly, 6 weeks, I worked for a little mom-and-pop circus in Alaska called the Wayne Brothers Circus. It's in Florida. And with that circus,
So you're with it?
I encountered my first taste of just absolutely unreasoned hatred.
I'm
When I
waiting for
ask
it.
somebody, you know where I'm going with it? Why do circus people hate the carnivals? Where does that come from?
Because everybody hates carnivals. I mean, it's looking for the origins for that. I guess it's right up there. Looking for the origins of why people are scared crackers of clowns. I guess. No, it's one of those mysteries that I've never had anybody in circus nor carnival ever be able to explain to me. Although I will tell you, if you work a very brief time, and it's a very small mom and pop operation. When you graduate to the much bigger units, the hierarchy in circus is frightening. You get rolling in from Europe in an American circus. Oh, in the old days, I mean, it's a little bit less like this nowadays. But in the old days especially, you come rolling in as the big act, the big name. Oh, the rest of the people in that show you were dirt. Oh, it's like they might have put it all up around you, but they were putting it up for you. And I mean, there were hierarchies in circus that were just unbelievable. I mean, it's like bull handlers, the guy who handles the elephants, they didn't associate with the clowns didn't associate with you. But they all worked together, and they all band together if anything from outside threatened it, which is the origin of the expression, with it, for it, never against it. With it being, gee, I'm on the show. For it, you could be, whether you were on the show or not. And never against it, well, that was where the loyalty came and went. I don't know if you've ever heard the expression, the hay-rube, but a hay-rube is, the origins of that come from, well, of course, you know, the audience is the rubes, the marks, the suckers. Although I did have one show guy tell me one time that all we are, all the show people are, we're just the marks and the suckers for the office, the guys who run the carnival, because they're going to get the money out of somebody. So they're going to have the show guys who put on the show that, you know, is working off the carnival. But in circus, yeah, it's all hierarchical, frighteningly so. And I think that just transposes itself over to carnival, where it's essentially seen as crass money getting, there's no real art and skill involved. And I mean, circus people can be real, or at least used to be, they can be real stuck up about all that. You know, it's like, hey, you know, it took me this many years to master walking a wire, and you're going to get out there and do some kazoonie act and get the money. You know, I'm art, and you're just, you know, whatever you are. A lot of that sort of, you don't find much of that existing really nowadays, because the business is so shrunken. You know, there are very few tiny circuses working anymore. Not on this continent. Well, some in Mexico, but not in the U.S. and Canada. You'll see small carnivals working. You'll still see 40-milers, as they call them, working, where it's essentially up outside Baltimore. You have Rosedale Amusements, and which is in an area just outside of Baltimore City called Rosedale. And they've been in business a bunch of years, and they travel all around essentially Maryland making money. little festivals and firemen's carnivals and that kind of stuff. But they don't travel a great distance because that demands more manpower and more money and logistics, and you got to bribe more people. Anybody thinks that the carnival is sleazy, including circus people, is really coming up short on what it's necessary to do in the world to make money and to do business. Because those carnival people roll in from outside of the town they're rolling into, and the first people that show up are police and politicians and the clergy. They all put their hand up because they wouldn't be bribed. They wouldn't be paid off to not make a stink about the fact that you're sitting in their town. And as long as you give them enough money, you can do almost anything you want. There were carnivals that were considered wide open, where literally you could do anything you wanted in those carnivals. You could, but those guys could go up against those games and lose their houses in those damn games. And the politicians would go, it's really sad, it's really a shame. Police would be like, well, they didn't make you play, kind of stuff. And then other times they'd need a sacrifice. They'd bust some poor sucker who just booked over the carnival. They'd sacrifice him and they'd blow town. And, but circuses used to be that way too. I mean, circus doesn't have a really great reputation at all. Now Circus Soleil and Ringling Brothers make it look like all clean and polished and sweet, and all sweetness and light. But in the old days, boy, there was ragbag shows that rolled into town, and they took their own pickpockets away. They did anything they could to get the money off of it. The rule of thumb was never rob a woman, never rob anybody who's old, never rob a kid. And that was the rule. Other than that, rob anybody you wanted. They didn't like robbing crippled people. They didn't do that. They hired them to work on the sideshow. That's what they usually do. But anyway, any other questions? Anything? Yes?
What's wrong with your nail bed?
Wait, are there OSHA standards for nail beds?
Actually there are, but they like the money as much as any of the carnival guys. No, the thing that I like, and this is funny, stage magic everybody accepts as, what's a damn lie? I mean, come on, they're doing things that ain't what they're telling you. I'm gonna walk through the Great Wall of China. Well, we all know that David Copperfield is not walking through the Great Wall of China. But what's amazing is how that story makes you want to believe it's possible. In sideshow, they don't do any of that. They're not lying to you. They're doing exactly what they tell you that they're going to do. And the line, of course, is, you want to know why I do it? Because you paid me to do it. That's why I'm doing it. You stop paying me, I'll stop doing it. But they're doing exactly what they tell you they're doing. But what they're playing on is your fears and your apprehensions about what they're doing. It's like the guy giving nail board is, everybody stepped on a nail, everybody knows that's no fun. So, oh my God, he's going to lay down thousands of them. So I'm thinking, I know what I need to do. I need to make fewer nails. No. See, that's why I'm a Bazoonie and not a sideshow guy. And that was the first, I'm talking, the old show guy that I was doing this with. When I first started shopping Amazed, I decided I needed to do publication parties for it. That's the only way you make any big money up front, if such can be said for the right. And I decided, publication parties are like watching paint dry. It's a guy at a table, and thanks for buying this. This is great. Thank you. So I was like, I gotta give a show. It's sideshow. Come on, I can do this. So I was going to do the nail board. I was going to do the nail board act for that. And I did. I put those suckers on a 2-inch grid. Boy, that looked dramatic. And I laid down on that damn thing, and I got right the hell back up. So I knew what pain was. No. So I'm talking to the old show guy, and saying, no, you could do a nail board act, any idiot can do that. And, and I'll do some magic, and I got this juggler kid that works for, Renfest locally, he'll come in and do this thing, and, and then I'll talk, I'll do the opening, because I was a, what they call dumb act, that, I was moved out of the same thing. You can imagine that. I don't know how I managed to pull that off. He's like, well, how did you make this thing? What was the problem we were having? Like, that's God, it hurts. God, I thought I was going to die to get off that thing. He goes, well, what did you do? I said, well, I got a 2-inch. I don't do a 2-inch grid when you nuts got a 1-inch. I don't do half-inch. Get them like this. Make it look like grass. You'll scare the hell out of them. And I learned my first lesson, should have been my first, but it was certainly the first act about performing, which is
the audience is going to be afraid of any of it. So you want to scare the hell out of them as much as you can up front, because then when you do the act, it's going to be even more amazing than it is that you even lived through it. So, I mean, literally, I've seen nail boards that it looked like grass. I mean, I've never seen so many nails on a board my whole life. And of course, the physics of it is, it's the same reason your refrigerator doesn't crash down into the basement. It's distribution of the weight. None of these acts are comfortable. They're not. They are not. And if you do them wrong, you can get hurt. I've been injured doing the nail board act. Usually what injures you is the damn volunteers. You pick them wrong. You pick them that enjoy being up there. No, you never want to pick somebody who wants to be up there. Because then they think it's their show. And then you gotta work against them. And I've had people almost kill me with that mall and not follow instructions and injure you that way.
Block, you see that block?
Yeah, well, I do three things. I stretch out on the nail board, then I have another nail board put on top of me, and I do a sandwich where people stand on that, and then I'll do an I-beam on top of me, and pound out with a sledgehammer and make a sideshow music. And then the other one is that they break the concrete block on me. But I've been injured doing any one of those because people won't follow instructions. You tell them, you get up this way, you get off that way, and then you do exactly what you told them not to do, and you're not prepared for it.
Have you ever seen a tomato smashed on it? I saw one just 6 months ago.
That kind of stuff's tough.
They take a tomato, they smash several tomatoes on the nail board, then they put it down, then the guy got on it, except he managed to sing Italian opera and get totally naked before he did it.
This is nice. Except I'd rather see the tomatoes. I've seen a lot of them sideshow guys naked. It's not. I really don't want to pay to watch it. No, that's like a free act I'll pass on.
Seeing tomatoes, I can do that.
Well, it's like another act with the melon, with a watermelon in the back of your neck, and then chop it with a machete. And all these acts, are survivable, and you won't necessarily get too beat up, but you don't kind of screw these acts up. I mean, I've hauled sword swallower to Johns Hopkins emergency room. It's not a lot of fun. And $35,000 later, she's trying to pay off the hospital and everything else because, unlike some countries, Europe and Canada, where the government will actually, they'll let you have insurance for this stuff and sort of like medical to cover it and all. We look at buskers as beggars. We look at them as like people who work the street kind of stuff. I mean, that's high art in Europe. I mean, and you get buskers who come from Europe. Those people know how to hold a crowd. They really know what entertainment's about because when you just start doing your thing in the middle of the sidewalk, and you got to gather people who are basically want to go, I'm going to get sucked into this. I got to get to work, and the next thing you know, you got a crowd of like 50, 100 people around you. That demands talent. That's talent. 1-inch grid. You don't want to win lower than that. I do know a guy though who I first saw him work 4 nails. I've seen him do 2 and I've seen him do 1. And it's not pleasant to watch. He went to the 4 nails he does fairly regularly, and he does it fairly well. He also does the futon barbed wire. You got sick of shoving nail boards. I mean, you know how much a box of nails weighs, like 20 penny nails. You got to use 2 of those damn things to make a nail board. I mean, it's like carrying your car into the venue. It's horrible. So what he did was that he worked out the idea where what he has literally it's a bed made out of barbed wire that he rolls up. And then when he wants to do the nail board, he just takes the barbed wire and rolls it out. I wouldn't lay down a barbed wire for all the money in the damn world. I don't care about the physics. I'm not doing it. I mean, it's one thing when all those nails are doing this. It's another thing when they're all, no, I'm not doing that. And when he finally...
That's the same way.
Yeah,
That's stuff. They're drinking on drugs or whatever. That's why they did the coke glass.
Well, most of the guys, Todd Robinson's name I mentioned earlier. Todd ate glass at the, he has a show that he calls Carnival, and it's literally, the call of the play is kind of wrong. It's a history lesson. It's a show-long history lesson about why the carnival is what it is, and why the acts are what they are, and how the show was set up to be a certain way, and how it worked mechanically, logistically, the whole thing was intentional. And what he, one of his signature acts is these light bulbs. And he literally took a light bulb and he'll sit there and he does the whole hesitation thing. And finally he just whips it up to his mouth and bites off the end of the thread. And just glass is going everywhere. And he sits there and just eats the whole light bulb. You know, the line is, oh look, stuffing! And that's down. And, but I mean, all of this stuff, again, it's all doable. I know guys who started doing it at that home. I watched this kid one time who literally thought there was something fake about it. He was drunk and literally did into like a drink glass, like a rocks glass. And yeah, we held him out there and it's like, you gotta know how to do this stuff. You know, some acts are great acts that you're only going to do once. You don't want that to be your show. You don't. You don't learn wire walking to fall. It's not the way you But anyway, any other questions? Hey, I'm here all night. Time to run around, I'm sure David will be more than happy to leave it open.
Exhibits here, there are banners, so they do a whole bunch of banners.
Oh, I didn't do my banner!
$1 extra, wait, $1 extra. Who wants to pay $1 extra for the banner? Adam, $1? You want to say banner? $1 for the charge.
Hell yeah!
So who wants $1 for the banner?
Well, I thought she paid up. She paid dollars up.
Yes.
I mean, you can say a few words. Actually, we'll do this historically in order, I guess. This fellow is probably one of those first banners of, oh, put the cup, that's order in there, you don't want to do that. Remember I was talking about people rent rooms, taking rooms? This gentleman, unnamed, sadly, I'm looking at who that was. The real was. But in the Civil War, these were called Onyx scenes. And they would, because the whole notion of traumatic amputation, where they cut off like their whole leg or their arm, they realized that guys who came back from the war like that sort of weren't very happy with their condition. Principally because their body configuration was altered continually. So they thought what they could do is if there were injuries to the bone, they could save the flesh, like what would take your shin bone out, that would be better because you still have evidence of your limb. So you'd have your bone shattered from a gunshot wound, and they basically would excise the bone, leave all the tissue, leave the muscle. You'd still have like limp arm, but you'd still have an arm. And this guy probably rented a room and then exhibited himself and lectured on his condition. He'd walk for you. I have no idea how I got this machine to walk without a brace, but he probably had a brace is what he had.
The rubber man did the bones.
Mostly it's Stellers and Ricks. Which is the same thing that makes not only contortionists, but also rubber skin. Same basic condition, but skin laid out. And the problem with that is that, gee, it almost engages into the rupture of blood vessels under your flesh. Because it's all super flexible, but to a point. And they get a lot of like leaves and stuff. And it's kind of rough. But the other thing I found out about contortionists, which was really kind of funny, and I never thought about it, they go like bending all around. You have to train yourself to do all that. Because that's not the way you're raised to move. So you have to sit there and you have to like, oh, if I bend my leg a certain way, what muscle am I, and literally it's all like just practicing to do it. It's also unbelievably tiring. It's one of the reasons why you won't see contortionists do the act, like you won't see them doing much in sideshow. The sideshow, you're going to have to do 20, 30 acts a day. You're going to keep doing it again and again and again, running people through the damn show. So you won't see contortionists much. They're seen in circuses where they can do like two acts a day. So we're seeing the TV doing it. But yeah, not a real common act. It's just too tiring. This guy was at Coney Island. Back in, I guess, it was in the late 80s.
Well, they've always been mine, I never had.
The guy who made this band is still around. Guy named Mark Frierson is considered one of the granddaddies now of the banner. These banners would not only because they were small. That one was small because it was intended for use by the guy who's going to hang it in the hall somewhere. He's going to hang it in the room. This was small because it's meant to fill up space. Because most of the sideshow banners are ginormous. I mean, they're on the front sideshows. They're meant to get your attention from a great distance. So billboards is what they are. They're advertising art that you buy into the show. So they're always like 8 by 9, 20 feet long, 9 tall. They're always huge. Everybody thinks, oh, I love sideshow banners. I really want to own one. Really? You want to own that? Billboard up your backyard, stare at your attic window at it. That's what it's like. Everybody I know who's bought one, they've ended up putting it on the ceiling somewhere because it's the only space that one can occupy. I do know a guy that had one painted for him. It was him doing the peacock and he had it hanging in his bedroom over the bed. I was like, Jeff, you're the strangest human being I know. It's sort of gives a really frightening level of being the missionary. And then this one, to show you how these transitions go, this was actually not a sideshow carnival. For one thing, it's smaller than this sucker would be probably 8 by 10 feet. This was painted for a club, or a variety of acts. Sideshows. Didn't stay in business very long, but was not only joined with that. But no, it was, I can't remember where this one was. But the guy who painted this banner, Lee Wheeler, is the guy that helped build out this house in London. He's always been fascinated with this stuff. And he did a whole series of banners for that bar. But it's very much in the matter of the mode of banners that you've seen inside here. It uses all the methodology, all of there's always a bullet on. They usually do the lettering on the ribbon. Not always, where it looks like it's curl all around, so they do a lot of that. Very, very often, it's central figure to get your attention. Whoever's written this, they're usually in some exotic locale, palm trees in the background. Penguin Boys is always got a nice clothes. But usually that means something like incredible, you just say a lie. The reason being that after the carnival started touring around, they realized a lot of people were pissed off because they realized when they got in, attraction fellows going to be alive and breathing. Oh, I don't know, a museum. Now they're but this is how it's there are a lot of people working in business right now. There are a lot of people working in business right now.
Well, I love this drink. I think if I ever get another shot, it's going to be. Yeah, it's like slippers.
Already paid so you don't need big advertising.
Oh yeah, she likes it, but
it's all commercial art design.
she loves to go out in it, but then I'll see her just freeze.
Yeah.
And then she looks at me and, because she
I'm
can't
going to put him in
move.
a
So
show.
you have to get
Hey, he's already in.
Bring her in.
He was in tonight.
Get all
That's
that. I thought, well, get boots.
But in any event,
And I tried
you
that,
guys
and
enjoy
she
the
thinks she's
spiel.
trapped.
There will
She
be
won't move with them. So,
my
and I know my mother used to live out in the country in West Virginia. She would walk down the lane in the van, and the dogs used to always let her go. So I would take her out and we would walk down the lane. And then we would walk back up the lane. And halfway
walk down the road. Yeah! That's all it takes.
so I had
Yeah, they're applauding.
halfway.
It was your act.
Which was was not easy.
What, like 20?
Well, you should.
Yeah. Yes, it was not an easy trip. So that was the last time it snowed. Yes.
Our dog, being that they're German,
Oh.
they
Well,
were
okay.
It's like, oh my God. Just looking at it. If they look,
You have to get them in.
Well,
Right.